Two shadowy figures bolt through the upscale avenues of Woodland Hills, California, as the clock strikes 4:53 on the afternoon of January 23, 2017. The stain of fresh blood marks their escape, leaving behind a celebrated hairstylist in the backyard of his million-dollar estate, bleeding out on his own patio. He's been savaged, with multiple stab wounds to his neck, face, and chest. And at this very instant, his teenage daughter is driving home, oblivious to the fact she's about to walk into a living nightmare. A scene of horror that will forever be seared into her memory. This is the story of Fabio Simentilli, a charismatic and successful immigrant from Italy. He forged an empire in the world of beauty. But this is also a story of the deepest betrayal imaginable, a chilling true crime tale of greed, obsession, and a meticulously planned murder. A plot set in motion by the one person sworn to love him above all others. On January 23, 2017, the 911 call registered at 4:54 p.m., carrying the trembling voice of a teenage girl gripped by pure terror. She was frantic, desperate to somehow save her father's life. 16-year-old Isabella Simentilli had just come home from school to discover her father, Fabio, lifeless. He was lying in an expanding pool of his own blood on their backyard patio. The scene was a grotesque tableau of violence, with numerous stab wounds telling a story of unimaginable brutality. As emergency services raced to the address, Isabella's horrified screams tore through the quiet neighborhood, but it was already too late. Fabio Simentilli, at just 49 years old, was pronounced dead at the scene. On the surface, it had all the hallmarks of a robbery that had spiraled violently out of control, a scenario common in the world of true crime. Two figures in hoods had been spotted on a neighbor's security camera just moments before the assault. They were seen jogging towards the Simentilli residence at 4:18 p.m., and Fabio's black Porsche was now missing, only to be found abandoned 5 miles away, its interior speckled with droplets of blood. But as investigators began to meticulously process the scene of the crime, the pieces just weren't fitting together. Detective Ryan Werner of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department examined the evidence with a growing sense of doubt. Fabio's high-end Rolex was still fastened to his wrist, and his wallet remained, untouched, in his pocket. Beyond that, absolutely nothing of value was missing from their luxurious home. There were no drawers thrown open, no safes cracked, and no indication of a forced entry. The timing of the entire event was almost unnervingly precise. At 4:18 p.m., the security footage shows two individuals jogging toward the house. By 4:53 p.m., the black Porsche is seen speeding away, and at 4:54 p.m., a mere 60 seconds later, Isabella's car is seen pulling into the driveway. It was as if the perpetrators knew the exact window of opportunity when Fabio would be completely alone and defenseless. Just 3 days after the brutal murder, Monica Simentilli organized a memorial service for her late husband, gathering friends and family in the very same backyard where he had met his end. Fabio had been savagely taken from them, and they were there to mourn a man who had left a mark on so many lives through his passion for the beauty industry. Monica, for her part, appeared utterly shattered by grief. She struggled to form coherent sentences, repeating over and over, "I'm not a wife anymore. I'm not a wife anymore." Her sorrow seemed absolute, an all-consuming anguish. But amidst the mourners, there was one person who simply didn't belong, and Monica's friend, Deborah Obard, saw him right away. He was a man she had never laid eyes on before. Yet, he was mingling with the grieving family, as if he were one of them. There was something about him that felt deeply unsettling. He didn't mesh with Fabio's known circle of friends and colleagues. But there he was, offering his condolences and looking entirely out of place. He wore a conspicuous bandage on his left index finger. Obard was so unnerved by his presence that she discreetly took his photograph. She then delivered that picture directly to the police. In a case that was quickly growing cold, that one single photograph would blow it wide open. The mystery man was identified as Robert Louis Baker. Within a matter of weeks, investigators unearthed a critical piece of information. Baker's DNA was already catalogued in law enforcement systems because he was a registered offender for crimes against a child. When they ran a comparison of his DNA against the blood droplets discovered inside Fabio's stolen Porsche, it came back as a perfect match. The physical evidence was undeniable, but the central question lingered. Who exactly was Robert Baker, and what could possibly be his motive for wanting Fabio Simentilli gone? The answer would unravel a sordid tapestry of lies, obsession, and a betrayal that had been festering for more than a year. Robert Louis Baker, 53 years of age, was a man living behind a carefully constructed facade. By day, he was a racquetball coach at an LA Fitness in West Hills. Charismatic, self-assured, and magnetic. Coacha. He was described by one person who knew him as having a very alpha male presence and kind of a sexual thing about him. To the outside world, he was successful and well regarded. He was always quick with a word of advice or encouragement, but hiding beneath that polished veneer was a far more sinister reality dating back to 1993. Baker had been found guilty of committing unspeakable acts against a minor, his own teenage stepdaughter. After completing his time in prison, in a truly disturbing turn of events, he married his victim, and they both ventured into the world of adult entertainment. By 2016, however, he had crafted a new persona as a fitness instructor, cloaking himself in an aura of respectability, all while a dark, predatory history lurked just beneath the surface. It was then that his gaze fell upon Monica Simentilli. At 45, Monica was the very embodiment of everything Baker coveted. She exuded elegance and sophistication, was married to a prosperous man, and lived the kind of opulent lifestyle he was desperate to claim as his own. A mother to 2 teenage daughters, she appeared utterly devoted to her husband of more than 2 decades. But according to Baker's own chilling testimony, their illicit affair ignited mere weeks after their first encounter at the gym in early 2016. What Monica failed to grasp was that she had just become the central obsession of a dangerous predator, a man who had already shattered one family and was fully prepared to shatter another. In a chilling pattern often seen in the world of true crime, Baker immediately began to isolate Monica from her life. He manipulated her into communicating solely through encrypted apps like Viber and untraceable burner phones, a deliberate technological veil to conceal their affair from her husband, Fabio. Investigators would later unearth a staggering fact. A full half of all Monica's digital communications were directed to Robert Baker, more than to her husband and 2 daughters combined. Let that reality settle in. Half of her entire digital existence was consumed by this one man. By the autumn of 2016, Monica's friend, Deborah Obard, couldn't shake a growing sense of suspicion. She observed Monica, dedicating more and more time to the gym, always in the orbit of the same man. When Deborah finally confronted her, Monica issued a fierce and absolute denial. Undeterred, Obard took her concerns to Fabio, warning him to keep a close eye on Monica's companions at the gym. His response, looked at in hindsight, is utterly heartbreaking. He dismissed the warning out of hand, his faith in his wife absolute and unwavering. After 2 decades of marriage, the thought of her betrayal was inconceivable to him. If only he'd known that his life was becoming the focus of a sinister plot, a dark tale of true crime, orchestrated by Robert Baker. In late 2016, a man named Christopher Austin journeyed from Oregon to Los Angeles. His flight paid for by Robert Baker. Austin, at 36, ironically worked as a parole and probation officer mentoring at-risk youth. He regarded Baker as an old friend and believed he was flying in for nothing more than a casual visit, perhaps some racquetball and a dose of California sun. He was completely oblivious to the fact that he was being summoned to become an accomplice in a murder plot. Austin would later testify that Monica welcomed both men into her home for dinner. Over pizza, she conducted a guided tour of the house, her focus lingering unnervingly on the backyard patio, the very spot where Fabio often unwound by the pool after his workday. She pointed out the floor plan, the escape routes, the hidden corners. It was a mission briefing, masked as a friendly gesture. At nearly the same time, Monica arranged for a security company to upgrade their home surveillance. This new system gave her the power to remotely access the camera feeds from her phone, from any location, at any time. She could pinpoint the exact moments Fabio was home, alone, and defenseless. Baker's own preparations took an even darker turn. He acquired GPS tracking devices and covertly attached them to both of Fabio's cars, his everyday vehicle and his cherished black Porsche. This allowed Baker to stalk Fabio's every move in real time, shadowing him like a hunter tracks its prey. According to Austin's testimony, Baker spun a tale of Monica being trapped in an abusive marriage, claiming she was desperate for Fabio to be gone. He painted her husband as a violent, controlling man who was destroying her life, casting himself as Monica's white knight, her valiant protector rescuing her from grave danger. However, testimony from Monica's own daughter, Jessica, would later completely demolish this carefully constructed lie. Jessica recounted walking into her mother's bedroom one morning in 2016, only to find Robert Baker in her mother's bed. This was never about a damsel in distress. It had nothing to do with safety or protection. This was about ownership. Baker craved Monica entirely for himself, her life, her wealth, and her undivided attention. And in a move straight from the darkest annals of true crime, he was willing to take a life to possess it all. The financial incentive alone was staggering. Fabio held a life insurance policy valued at $1.6 million. Upon his death, Monica stood to inherit the entire sum. It was a clean slate, with Baker no contentious divorce, no fight for custody, no division of property, just a grieving widow and her new lover, their future financed by his demise. The meticulous planning was now finished. All that remained was to find the perfect moment to strike. On January 22, 2017, the day before the plan was set in motion, Monica sent Baker a pivotal text message. According to Christopher Austin's testimony, Fabio was on his way to the store. This was their first attempt to murder Fabio. Baker and Austin had positioned themselves to intercept him, weapons at the ready and adrenaline surging. But the plan went awry. Austin would later claim he couldn't follow through with the attack on that day. Perhaps it was a sudden attack of conscience, or maybe the logistics simply weren't perfect. For whatever reason, Fabio returned home unharmed that evening, completely oblivious to the fact his wife had just tried to have him killed. But Baker refused to give up. He was in too deep, having invested too much. Monica had dangled the promise of a new life together, complete with access to the insurance money and freedom from his own financial burdens. He described Monica's immense wealth to Austin, insisting that once Fabio was gone, they could disappear together and finally live the life they deserved. The plan itself was chillingly straightforward. Make it appear like a burglary gone wrong, collect the insurance payout, and start over somewhere new. That night, Monica's behavior was a masterclass in deception, a performance straight out of a true crime playbook. While she comforted her daughters and played the grieving wife, she was already mentally planning Fabio's funeral. The show had begun, and the fatal trap was set. Fabio Simentilli had less than 24 hours left to live on January 23, 2017. It was the day that would ultimately destroy multiple families forever. Monica's scheme depended on flawless timing and an unbreakable alibi. That afternoon, she left her home in a black Ford pickup truck, telling Fabio she was simply going shopping at Target, a perfectly normal errand designed to raise no suspicion. Surveillance footage captured her truck entering the Target parking lot. At around 4 in the afternoon, before Monica even entered the store, another person slipped into her vehicle. Prosecutors firmly believe that individual was Robert Baker, there to receive his final instructions for the murder. She then went inside Target, solidifying her alibi, while texting Baker that the path was clear. Fabio was now home alone. Baker got the signal and informed Austin, "She's going to the store. We have a small window of opportunity. Austin testified that Baker had him climb into the trunk of a rented Nissan and then drove to a staging area near the Simentilli home. Once they arrived, Baker handed Austin a knife and asked, "Are you with me?" Austin would later tell the jury, "Like a dummy." I said yeah, and followed him. At 4:18 in the afternoon, they jogged toward the house, disguised as two fitness enthusiasts on a routine afternoon exercise, the perfect cover, captured by multiple security cameras throughout the neighborhood. Austin testified that Baker had told him the front door would be unlocked. "She's going to leave the door open," he had said. When prosecutors asked who she was, Austin replied without a flicker of hesitation, "The defendant." The door was, indeed, unlocked, a damning detail in this shocking true crime case. Fabio Simentilli was sitting peacefully on his backyard patio, unwinding by the pool after another successful day as the vice president at Weller, one of the world's most prominent beauty companies. He had built an empire through sheer talent and determination, working with Hollywood stars and mentoring young stylists who absolutely idolized him. He never saw them coming. Robert Baker brutally stabbed Fabio multiple times in his neck, face, and chest. The attack was so frenzied that Baker actually cut his own finger in the process. The very same finger that would be wrapped in a bandage when he brazenly attended Fabio's memorial service just 3 days later. Crucially, Fabio had no defensive wounds, suggesting he was taken completely by surprise by men he had never met, sent to his home by the woman who had promised to love him forever. Baker and Austin fled the scene in Fabio's Porsche, abandoning it 5 miles away. The timeline was perfect, choreographed like a deadly dance. At 4:53 in the afternoon, the killers drove away. At 4:54 in the afternoon, exactly 60 seconds later, Isabella's car pulled into the driveway. Isabella's terrified screams echoed through the neighborhood as she discovered her father's body and dialed 911. The operator guided her through frantic attempts to save Fabio's life, but the wounds were simply too severe. He was already gone. Monica arrived home just minutes later, pulling up to a house swarmed by police cars and ambulances. Her performance began the moment she stepped out of her truck. When Monica's friend, Elise Bluewell, arrived at the house that evening, a stranger escorted her inside with a chilling warning, "Don't step in the blood." Monica appeared utterly devastated. Bluewell remembered her just sitting there, the very picture of a shattered, grieving widow, unable to articulate a single coherent thought. "I'm not a wife anymore," she repeated endlessly. "I'm not a wife anymore." It was a chilling mantra, her mind struggling to process a reality she had engineered. Yet, while Monica presented a portrait of public anguish, she was privately celebrating her grim victory. That very evening, as her husband lay in the morgue, she was already inquiring about Fabio's life insurance. She demanded to know when the $1.6 million would be paid out. Her priorities were disturbingly clear. The money was the mission, and her grief was merely a convincing charade. For months, Monica masterfully played the part of the grieving widow, all while secretly indulging in her torrid affair with Baker. Police surveillance, however, captured their every move. They were documented taking romantic getaways to Las Vegas and Myrtle Beach, where Monica introduced herself to Baker's circle as Monica Baker, already living out the fantasy their new life together. A life funded by her husband's murder. Monica would call Detective Jean Parcel relentlessly, but never to ask for justice for Fabio in this shocking true crime case. Instead, she pressed for updates on DNA evidence and repeatedly asked for a timeline on when the insurance money would be released. Her concern wasn't for catching Fabio's killers, it was for cashing in on her payday. But investigators were one step ahead, meticulously documenting every call, every trip, and every clandestine meeting. And the intricate web of deception was on the verge of total collapse. By February 2nd, 2017, Robert Baker was their #1 suspect. His DNA in Fabio's stolen Porsche was the irrefutable proof they needed. When investigators brought his name up to Monica, she feigned ignorance, claiming she hardly knew the man and wasn't even certain of his last name. She insisted he was just Rob, a casual acquaintance from her gym. Confronted with the damning evidence of Baker's blood in the Porsche, Monica spun a preposterous tale. She alleged that she had accidentally struck him with a racquetball racket and had brought a blood-stained towel home. The story was desperate, illogical, and the investigators didn't believe it for a single moment. For months, they maintained surveillance on the secret lovers, documenting their ongoing relationship, while Monica put on a public performance as the heartbroken widow. The evidence against them was piling up: encrypted texts on burner phones, records of GPS tracking device purchases, and, most damningly, their continued romance, while Fabio's murder was still fresh. On June 14, 2017, police executed a brilliant sting operation. Monica and Baker were pulled over, ostensibly for a routine traffic stop. The officers claimed the vehicle might be stolen and needed to be inspected. The two suspects were then handcuffed and strategically placed in the back of a patrol car, which was secretly wired for sound. What they would say to each other, believing they were alone, would become key evidence against them in court. Shortly after, they were formally arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder as they were processed. It was then that the staggering weight of the case against them was revealed. In a classic true crime investigative tactic, Monica was also placed in a cell with an undercover officer posing as an inmate. She confided to the officer, "He's not just my lover, he's my confidant. He's my everything." Even with steel bars between them, their toxic obsession raged on. Police intercepted jail mail where Monica signed off as Mrs. Baker and Monica Baker. In one especially revealing letter, she lamented how it kind of hurts to not be touched or caressed or intimately loved by you. In recorded jailhouse calls, Baker reciprocated, telling Monica, "I love you, baby. I really do." They were so lost in their shared delusion that they continued to plan a future together, even as they both faced life sentences for murder. The trial of Monica Simentilli commenced with the explosive testimony of Christopher Austin, the parolee who had been roped into committing the heinous act. In exchange for a lighter sentence, Austin had agreed to testify against Monica, and his account was utterly devastating. He described the so-called reconnaissance mission, cleverly disguised as a dinner party, and recalled how Monica had pointedly showed them the exact spot in the backyard where Fabio would later be ambushed and killed. He spoke of Baker's promises of a share of the insurance money, but in a stunning courtroom twist, Robert Baker himself took the stand to testify in Monica's defense. In a desperate, last-ditch effort to save her, he claimed she had zero knowledge of the murder plot. Baker swore he had acted alone, driven by an obsession to be around her and with her more, like all the time. While Baker's testimony introduced a sliver of doubt, the prosecutors had a mountain of overwhelming circumstantial evidence. The GPS trackers, the mysteriously unlocked door, and her perfectly timed alibi at Target, the immediate questions about the insurance payout, the romantic trips taken while Fabio's family was Deputy District Attorney Beth Silverman laid it bare for the jurors. This case was, at its very core, about a profound betrayal. Monica had spun a web of deceit around everyone: her husband, her own children, her friends, and the investigators. She was the architect of every single detail of the murder plot. That night, she left her teenage daughters at home, showing a chilling lack of concern for the supposed killers who had just taken their father's life. And why? Because there was never any real danger. She knew precisely who the perpetrators were. In a classic true crime defense, Monica's attorney argued she was guilty of foolishness and deceit, of lying and infidelity, but not of murder. He painted her as a naive woman, ensnared in an affair, completely manipulated by Baker's consuming obsession. The jury was left to decide the central question of this tragic true crime story. Was Monica a hapless victim of Baker's fixation, or was she the cold, calculating mastermind behind her husband's savage murder, a plot driven by money and passion? On April 11th, 2025, after 8 grueling hours of deliberation spread across 3 days, the jury delivered their verdict. Guilty on all counts: first-degree murder and conspiracy, with the special circumstances of murder for financial gain, and lying in wait. These charges carried a mandatory sentence of life without parole. On June 23, 2025, that sentence was handed down. Monica Simentilli would spend the rest of her life in prison. The judge's words were clear and final. In listening to the evidence in this matter, I do find that the defendant was the mastermind in this conspiracy to commit murder. Robert Baker, for his part, had already been sentenced to life without parole after pleading no contest. Christopher Austin received a sentence of 16 years to life in exchange for his cooperation with prosecutors, while Monica Simentilli traded 20 years of marriage and her family's future for a dark fantasy built on blood and betrayal. In the aftermath, her daughters lost both of their parents, one to a brutal murder, the other to insatiable greed and obsession. They must now carry the heavy burden of knowing their own mother orchestrated their father's death. Meanwhile, Fabio's son from his first marriage, Luigi, keeps his father's Rolex as a treasured memento. "He wore this all the time," Luigi recalls. "He wore it when he died. I wear it for special occasions when I want to feel close to him." That Rolex, the one the killers could have easily stolen but left behind, has become a potent symbol of what this true crime story was never really about. This was never a burglary gone wrong. It wasn't about watches, wallets, or any material possessions. It was about a woman who craved everything: passion, excitement, money, and a new life, and was willing to obliterate her family to obtain it. Fabio Simonti had built a beautiful life through immense hard work and unwavering determination. He mentored aspiring stylists, collaborated with Hollywood stars, and loved his family with all his heart. Several scholarships and educational programs now bear his name, ensuring his legacy of kindness lives on. But his life was cut short at just 49, by the person who knew him most intimately, loved him the least, and wanted his money above all else. In a final, cruel twist, Monica got exactly what she desired: a life with Robert Baker, just not the one she had envisioned. Instead of luxury vacations and insurance payouts, they will spend the rest of their lives in separate prison cells, their twisted love affair reduced to monitored phone calls and letters read by guards. This case serves as a chilling reminder in the world of true crime that the greatest danger can emerge from those closest to us, from the person sleeping beside us, sharing our home, and raising our children. The very person who promises to love us until death do us part. Sometimes they mean it far more literally than we could ever imagine. Thanks for tuning in to Crimes in the FOG. If you're intrigued by the complex motives behind true crime from around the world, don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.